48. Well, let's come back to our conversation. That increase in national insurance for employees and employers. Remember, it is so that we can tackle, or they can tackle the backlog of the care in the NHS and social care reform. Here to give us more details on that is Health and Social Care Secretary Sajid Javid, joining us from the new Queen Elizabeth II Hospital in Welwyn Garden City. You won't be surprised to hear, Secretary of State, that I've taken calls from people who are having to make extraordinary economies, such things as giving up going out for meals, giving up holidays. One young mum saying she'll actually go without a meal a day to ensure she can feed her own children. Explain to my listeners why they need to make this sacrifice, if you would. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. And first, let me explain what the money does, and then answer that a bit more directly as well.
Sure.
This levy, it's going to contribute to an additional £39 billion, additional on top of what was planned pre-pandemic, into the NHS and adult social care. Why do we need that? Is because I think we can all see that the impact of the pandemic has been huge in terms of the pressures on the NHS and social care, and that impact sadly is going to continue for many years as the NHS catches up and as does social care. This funding in the NHS, it will mean it can operate at some 130% of normal sort of pre-pandemic activity levels. It will pay for some 9 million more scans, tests and procedures. It will be the biggest catch-up fund in the history of the NHS. For adult social care, it means that for the first time, a government has actually grabbed hold of the real serious problems, put it on a sustainable funding path, meaning that more people will get support with their care costs should they need adult social care, and everyone will be protected from the catastrophic costs of care. Now, in terms of that's what the funding does. Clearly, that money has to come from somewhere. If we all want an NHS, for instance, that's free at the point of use, it's there for all of us when we need it, it's got to be funded by general taxation, and that's what this is about. Now, if we didn't fund it ourselves, if this generation didn't fund it, the only other way to do this would have been to borrow the money, and that would not only have been economically dangerous in terms of the risk to the public finances. We've already taken on £400 billion of extra debt because of the pandemic. I think also it would be morally wrong to ask our children to pay for our healthcare and social care.
But back to the point you made, Secretary of State, we didn't have the money when COVID struck, and quite rightly, you and your colleagues went in and took on enormous amounts of debt because, honestly, I don't think we had a choice, 400 billion. Why not do the same here? Why do you have single mums not able to eat and people not able to go on holiday and people making all sorts of economies, Secretary of State?
Well, you make a very important point, but I think that as a society, we can handle both. We can properly fund, as a country, the NHS and social care, but also protect those people that are most vulnerable and need it most. And that is why the Chancellor has also set out over the last few weeks help, for example, with energy costs, £9 billion of support, the doubling of what's called the hardship fund that's held by local authorities to £1 billion to help some of the most vulnerable in communities across the country. And then also, the best way for people to get out of poverty, to stay out of poverty, is, of course, having a vibrant economy that's creating jobs. We have an economy today that has one of the lowest levels of unemployment that we've seen in decades, the lowest level, for example, of youth unemployment we've seen in 20 years or so, and also for some of the lowest paid, there's more support with the record increase in the national living wage, meaning someone working full-time at that wage is £1,000 better off a year, and the cut in taxes, the cut. So you talk about the levy, which for some people is an increase. By the way, over half the levy is being paid for by the 15% of richest, highest earners in this country. So it's done in a fair way. But the cut in national insurance contributions means that 70% of workers, 70%, are better off even after accounting for the levy.
When will we see the impact of this fund as regards the backlog? Are you able to say to me, Nick, you and I can talk in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 12 months' time, and we will have cut that waiting list by 10%, 15%, 20%? Sajid Javid.
What I'm able to say is that because of this funding and the reforms, because it can't just be about money, we need to make sure the NHS is more efficient, does more for every pound that it gets. But I can say that in 6 months' time, a year's time, that the NHS will, in terms of activity, it would have increased dramatically. It will be seeing a lot more people.
What's a dramatic?
What I can't tell
Come on,
you,
Mr. Javid. What's dramatic?
I can tell you what the dramatic. Oh yeah, I can tell you that because the NHS plan is to get activity levels to 130% of pre-pandemic. Is to pay for millions of more diagnostic tests and scans and procedures, and doing it in new ways. It can't be business as usual. So the new community diagnostic centres. I went to see one last week in London, where they open up a new community diagnostic centre in one hospital where it's open 7 days a week. And it's seeing people for scans, MRI scans, CT scans in a way that was not being done before. We've got new surgical hubs for major operations like cataracts and seeing people in and out at half the time that it took before. That's how the NHS is going to crack through this COVID backlog.
Lastly, on the NHS, respond to this text, if you would, from Anthony in Kent. Can you ask Sajid Javid what happened to the £350 million a week that we'd benefit for the NHS from Brexit? Is that money factored in as well, Secretary of State?
That the extra funding that was promised to the NHS before the pandemic hit, to remind your listeners, that was an additional £34 billion a year by 2024. That's all there. That's still happening. That's going on. The NHS is getting that funding. What we're talking about today is an additional £39 billion over the next 3 years, with every penny from the new levy going towards that, and that's to deal with the challenges of the pandemic.
And that's on top of the £350 million we get from leaving the EU.
That's right. That's right.
All right, let's move to other matters. The Prime Minister talking very tough about events in Ukraine, and President Zelensky questioning the impact. Questioning the impact of the United Nations. Do you share his disappointment that the UN could be doing more, Sajid Javid?
Yes, I do. Look, the UN is a huge. It's an important organisation, of course, hugely important, but it's a large organisation with over 180 odd members. Almost every country in the world, some wielding more power than others, including Russia as a permanent member of the Security Council. It's far from perfect, and I absolutely share what President Zelensky set out yesterday, his frustrations. The UN should be doing more, but we shouldn't be relying just on the UN. It's up to each and every country to do what it can, either itself bilaterally, and I'm pleased with this, either the military support, the humanitarian support, the support from my department for Ukraine, for example, with the medical aid. I've got ambulances now going there as well for the first time, as well as all the medical equipment we sent, but also through the G7 and the EU. I was pleased to hear that overnight the EU have set out a range of sanctions, some of them very new, sort of tough sanctions, and that's exactly the kind of approach that we should all be taking.
Sorry, those ambulances are spare to capacity within the NHS?
Yes,
or they're private?
yes.
I see.
No, they are. They're spared. These are older ambulances that the NHS no longer needed, and
Good.
So we've sent 4, and I think in total we're going to send around 20, and we'll do what more we can.
The Labour Party suggests that the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Andrei Kelin, should be expelled. Are you in agreement with that?
That's a decision for the Foreign Office. I mean, I can see why someone would say that. I completely understand it. But it is, I think, also important that we have a dialogue with Russia. I don't think it would be to anyone's advantage to cut off all discussions and dialogue. I also thought yesterday that when our Prime Minister appealed directly to the Russian people, trying to talk to the Russian people directly through media, it was right as well. I think the average Russian is an ordinary, decent, hardworking, compassionate person, and they don't want these atrocities unfolding. Surely they can't want to see what's happening in Ukraine right now, happening on European soil, and I think it's right to appeal to them directly as well.
Last couple of points. Politico is reporting there will be fresh sanctions against Russia today from the British government. Are they correct?
Well, let's wait and see. I mean, the Prime Minister has always been very clear that we will not hesitate to take further action if necessary, and let's see what he says.
All right, and lastly, reminding my listeners, you served as Culture Secretary under David Cameron some years ago. There are reports that there's a growing rebellion over the privatisation of Channel 4. Is that a correct move by your colleague Nadine Dorries, and indeed by the Prime Minister, to sell off Channel 4?
No, I think it is. Yeah, I think that.
Why?
I mean, I love Channel 4. I think it's great, but I want a Channel 4 that can compete in a what is a vastly changing landscape. I think we can all agree that since Channel 4 was created, that the media landscape
By Margaret
has
Thatcher,
changed beyond recognition.
a conservative creation that provides a lot of employment to what are called indies, independent production companies that make programs that travel around the world, is a success story. It's offering employment, and this conservative government wants to sell it.
And you must think carefully about why could it be better off being sold. And the reason is that to compete properly, it needs to be able to raise its own funds and capital, whether that's debt or equity, to do that in a way that it can properly compete in a vastly changing media landscape. This will set Channel 4 free. It will still be, by the way, a public broadcaster like ITV. It will have a public license. It will have duties under that. ITV is a great British broadcaster too, but it's been privately held now for many, many years, and it's grown stronger. It's been able to compete, I think, as a result of that, more effectively. And by the way, my understanding is the funds that will be raised, I don't know how much eventually, there'll be that all have to be worked out, but the funds that will be raised, which will be considerable from the sale, will all be reinvested back in the creative industries, including your independent productions.
Grateful for your time, Health Secretary Sajid Javid, joining us from that hospital in Welwyn Garden City. Time now, 2 minutes after 8, news on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, millions of